Right now, at the dead center of the technology world, there is a number almost nobody says out loud. Roughly $700 billion. That is what America's biggest tech giants have committed to spending on computing infrastructure in a single year. Not over a decade, just 1 year. And the entire justification for this colossal bet hangs one quite fragile assumption that what they are building, while stay expensive, stay secure, and stay under their control, means while on the opposite side of the planet, companies that were deliberately cut off from the world's most advanced chips have started doing something that turns that assumption into ash. They are giving away artificial intelligence models that are good enough for the vast majority of real work at prices crashing towards zero and letting anyone download them for free. If you want to grasp why serious investors are now whispering the world bubble, it is not because the technology failed, it works brilliantly. It is because the business model might be built on sand. And that terrifying possibility is exactly what China has spent the last 2 years methodically engineering. Before we dive deep, smash that like button because this investigation pulls back the curtain on $1 trillion illusion and subscribe with the bell so you never miss a revelation. Let us unravel and the truth. The bet nobody is allowed to lose. Over the past 2 years, the biggest American technology companies have unleashed the largest coordinated building spree in the history of private business. Data centers, power contracts, cooling systems, and above all, chips is staggering quantities. Estimates for what the top handful of firms will spend in 2026 alone land between 600 and 700 billion dollars, with roughly three quarters pointed directly at artificial intelligence. Compare that to what the same group spent just 2 years earlier, and you are looking at spending that has more than doubled or even tripled. And here is the part that truly bites. The money is no longer coming totally from profits, but increasingly from debts, markets, corporate bond issuance from these companies in the opening months of 2026 ran well past $150 billion, which by some years is more borrowing than the sum group did in the previous 5 years combined. When a company builds something with its own spare cash, a disappointing outcome is embarrassing, but when it builds with borrowed money, a disappointing outcome becomes a problem for everyone who lent it. The wall that was supposed to settle everything. The logic of the American strategy was clean. Frontier artificial intelligence needs massive amounts of specialized computing hardware designed by a tiny number of American firms and made in facilities dependent on American, Dutch, and Japanese equipment. Control the flow of those chips and you control who sits at the frontier. So Washington restricted them, first the top-end chips, then the slightly slower versions built to squeeze under the limit, then the work around are renting computing power abroad. On paper, it was an elegant strategy, but it created an alternative possibility. What if being denied the expensive part forces you to find a cheaper one? And what if the cheaper path turns out to be the more important discovery that is no longer hypothetical, it is reality? Chinese labs learned the art of doing far more with far less, structuring a models only a fraction activates, compressing the numbers inside, eliminated wasted computing cycles and batching requests. All of this is a direct assault on the cost per unit of intelligence, and it erodes the very assumption on which the American infrastructure build-out was premised. The DeepSeek warning shot. For most of the world, this story became real with DeepSeek, a Chinese lab operating under hardware restrictions explicitly designed to hold it back. Released a model genuinely competitive at the frontier of reasoning and then published to webs, so anyone could download and torment every part of their sentences. Is the problem for the trillion-dollar bet. Competitive quality breaks the assumption of a permanent American lead. Success under restrictions undermines the entire logic of export controls, and published wares destroy the idea that this technology can be kept behind a subscription wall. And DeepSeek did not stay alone. Alibaba's Coin family, Moonshot, Scheme, AI's GLM series, and ByteDance releases filled every price and capability slot, mostly under permissive open licenses. Coin alone passed a billion cumulative downloads by March 2026, and at certain points accounted for more than half of all open model downloads worldwide. American universities are now building specialized models on top of Chinese open webs for a few tens of dollars in compute. The default foundation for much of the world's OpenAI research is now Chinese. The good enough problem. Now the theory turned into revenue, and this is the most underrated part of the entire story. Ask what companies actually use AI for: in production, summarizing documents, answering routine customer questions, translating, extracting data from invoices, reviewing code, and coding alone now makes up more than half the usage on some major neutral platforms. Now ask how many of those tasks require the single smartest model in existence, almost none. The moment a business realizes this, the buying decision flips from who is best to who is cheap enough to use at scale. On the largest neutral routing platform, American models held roughly 70% of token volume in mid-2025. A year later, that share had fallen to about 30%, while the total market itself grew several times over. Open weight models went from around 11% of enterprise application traffic to nearly 30% within months. And American companies themselves were routing large chunks of their traffic to Chinese model. The reason: price. The price war and the structural trap. Flagship American models are typically priced at a couple of dollars per million input tokens, while serious Chinese alternatives are priced in cents, savings of 60 to 90%, and in the most extreme pairings, up to 19.8%. Firms have moved their entire production traffic to Chinese providers and describe the savings as millions of dollars. Here is the strategic point: a price war is survivable when your competitor also needs to make money, but it is a completely different situation when your competitor's business model does not depend on that revenue at all. Several of these Chinese labs sit inside enormous parent companies with cloud businesses, e-commerce platforms, and advertising engines. A widely adopted model is a way to sell cloud capacity, lock in developers, and establish a national standard. Not a profit center. That is a fundamentally different economic position than a company whose valuation depends on eventually charging a lot for exactly that something. This is not like selling software. Traditional software is one of the best businesses ever invented. Write it once and sell a million copies at near zero extra cost, but every single time someone uses a large AI model, real computing hardware spins up, electricity is consumed, and machine wear down on a short depreciation schedule. More popularity means more compute, more power, more cooling, more hardware. Warning out, the classic software equation is flipped, so the whole thing hinges of the gap between what you charge per unit of usage and what that unit costs you to serve. And that is exactly the gap of price war compresses massive fixed costs, debt, financing, real variable costs on every request, and a competitor deliberately driving the price customers are willing to pay toward the floor. It is a squeeze from both directions at once. The machine that must keep eating. The spending is no longer just a technology story, it is an industrial one that now supports chip designers, memory manufacturers, server assemblers, construction firms, power generators, and cooling specialists. The Bank for International Settlements, the institution central bank, turned to use a 2026 annual report to flag an AI spending bust as a top concern for global financial stability, highlighting complex financing structure where equity, debt, and supplier contracts all point back at the same small cluster of companies, a loop in which investment supports spending, spending supports supplier revenue, and supplier revenue supports the valuation that make the next round of financing easier. And that same loop can amplify a downturn just as fiercely. The IMF has raised related concerns about the debt and about how much of the announced capacity has not physically broken ground yet. China does not have to win, it only has to change the outcome. Most coverage asks the wrong question. Will China build the best model? But look at what actually threatens the American position. It is the belief that advanced AI will remain scarce, expensive, and controlled by a small group. China does not need to capture the frontier. It only needs to make good enough intelligence abundant and nearly free. That is a far easier target, and by most measures, it has already been hit. The US data tells the story directly. The Chinese models with the highest volume are frequently not the ones that rank highest on intelligence benchmark. Usage and raw capability have decoupled because developers are optimizing for cost per token and for practical strength like coding. The market stopped buying the best and started buying the sufficient. The blueprint we have already seen: solar panels, batteries, EVs, telecom. In each industry, the pattern was identical. A technology starts expensive, premium, and dominated by Western firms. Then Chinese manufacturers enter with enormous scale, relentless cost engineering, paper-thin margins, and decade-long horizon. Prices collapse. The technology stops being a luxury and becomes ordinary infrastructure, and Whoever built their business on its staying expensive discovers they were in a completely different industry. Solar power won, batteries won. The question was never about the technology working. The question was who captured the profit, and the answer turned